Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. We love hearing from you. Send us email, info@hancepodcast.com. We encourage you to flip through the back episodes. You'll find something you like. A lot of great interviews are there, a lot of great stories as well. Chancellor, get us started, as you always do, with a saying of the day.
The saying of the day goes back to former President Jimmy Carter passed away yesterday. And one of the few things, he had a lot of sayings, and most of them I didn't agree with, or, it's just I didn't think they fit. But he did say that whatever starts in California, unfortunately, tends to spread. and that's right on a lot of things. Proposition 8, when they cut back on property taxes, that started in California in 1979, 78, during that period of time. So he was certainly right on that. He passed away, and he's 100. He's the first president we've ever had that lived to be 100. He and Rosalind were married for 77 years, and he grew up in Plains, Georgia. His dad was a farmer. His granddad was a farmer, and he went to the Naval Academy. He was a good student in high school, went to the Naval Academy, did well at the Naval Academy, and was commissioned in 1946, just missed the World War II. But Admiral Rickover was a fan of his. And he was on a pretty fast track to do well in the Navy. And but the Admiral was helping him, and then Carter's dad died. And so he had to go back home and take over the business. He did that, and he stayed in the reserves, the Naval Reserves, till 61. So he had some time there. But they were peanut farmers, and they had different types of businesses related to peanuts, and he was involved in that. Jimmy Carter was a man of faith. He was a good Christian man. He got elected state senator, and was a state senator for 2 terms, and then he ran for governor and was elected to governor for 2 terms. He lost the first time he ran, but he ran again. And there was one of the gentlemen that was African-American. Some people were complaining about his campaign, and it was too conservative. And this African-American preacher said, that's the only way he's going to win Georgia, And once he got to be governor, he added speaking engagements all over the country. Did a lot in Iowa and also in New Hampshire. And one of the things he did in Iowa, he went up there 2 years before the election and almost lived. He spent about 80% of his time in Iowa for 2 years. He went to every community. He went to every county and solicited votes. And it paid off, and he's the first person that made the Iowa caucus significant because he won big, and no one expected to, and he got a lot of free publicity, and then he pulled off, a good showing in New Hampshire as well, and then it went to South Carolina, and South Carolina being next to Georgia, he won there, and he's off and running. And he happened to be at the right place at the right time. President Ford was his opponent, and President Ford had pardoned President Nixon and had been advised by Leon Jaworski, who was the prosecutor for Watergate, to do that. Jaworski said, I think for healing and everything, you ought to do that and put that behind us and let us forget it and move on. He did, and it probably cost him the election. It was still a close election. And they had the election. At that time, Texas was a swing state. It was the last time it was a swing state. And the swing in the vote was in East Texas, rural East Texas. And if you went from Lufkin to Tyler to Marshall and Nacogdoches, all that area, whoever won that area was going to win Texas and would probably win the presidency. And so Carter spent a lot of time late in the election. Ford saw that he had a chance, and they brought him back in several times. I tell the story about the the custodian in Tyler at the junior college. The White House wanted to go back and do a campaign event in Tyler. And so they decided to do it at the gymnasium at Tyler Junior College. And some people from the FBI advance team were over there looking it over, and they were walking across the gym floor. And the guy he was a special needs kind of challenged guy that was in charge of the floor, and he had just shined it. And they were walking across the floor, and he yelled at them, "Hey, get your ass off that floor. Get off, get off." And they said, "We're from White House." And, Patrick Mahomes is from a little town right outside Tyler named White House. Mm-hmm. And their White House's big rival is ARP, A-R-P. Anyway, they said, "We're from the White House," and they were meaning the White House in Washington, the two advance men. And the guy said, "I don't give a damn if you from ARP, get off that floor." President Bush always liked that story. But he was getting them told, and Carter was the last Democrat to ever carry Texas. Mm-hmm. And don't see that changing anytime soon. But one of the things that helped him, he ran and he really emphasized that he was a Southern Democrat. And most people felt like that meant that he was going to be moderate to conservative, and he was not. He was very liberal. He tried a lot of things, but he had one great success, and that was the Camp David Accords, where Israel gave back some of the land they had taken in a short war, a 9-day war, they had taken from Egypt. And Begin and Sadat met at Camp David for like 9 days. Mm-hmm. And they finally got it worked out. I was at the White House in Congress at the time, and Carter was the first one I ever served under. And I was at the time at the White House when they had Begin and Sadat there and announced the signing of the Camp David Accord. And that has held true, and it has produced more stability in that area than it had ever been before. Now, we still see what Hamas and how they attacked. You still have the hostilities there, but it was a step in the right direction, and that President Carter should get full credit on that. He created the Department of Education. I voted against it. They were trying to get everybody to vote for it and said it'll be good. It'll help get education better and everything. And I just felt like it's probably going to be more meddling by the federal government. The federal government has had a history of staying out of local education issues and allowing the local government and the state governments to make those decisions, and that's the way it should be. I think that President Trump's going to look closely at abolishing the Department of Education and the Department of Energy. And so we'll see what happens on that. But Carter passed the Department of Energy the year before I got there, and then created the Department of Education the year after I arrived. He was a gentleman. He would have you over to the White House and was very kind, and I think he meant well. But he didn't have a staff that they were all from Georgia and worked for him for governor. And there's a big leap being governor of Georgia at that time. Georgia wasn't that large. Atlanta wasn't that large. And there's a big leap from going to be a governor and have your staff and take them with you to Washington, D.C. There were some of us that felt like that had President Carter picked Bob Strauss as his chief of staff, that he would have had a lot better presidency and would have had a chance of getting reelected. He got a primary opponent with Ted Kennedy in 1980. This is a little trivia. At the National Convention, Carter won the Democratic nomination, and Kennedy came in second, and I came in third. and there were three farmers from Gerald McCatherine and a couple other guys that did not like Carter, and they didn't like, Kennedy, and they didn't tell me they were going to. I was sitting there listening, and they said, and 3 votes for Congressman Kent Hance. Is kind of, wow, how'd I get 3 votes come in third? But that's a little trivia question if you want to ask somebody sometime. And in the election, Carter's people, they had some of us that were conservative Democrats over the White House, and they told us, hey, Reagan will be easy to beat. He's too conservative, too radical. He'll be easy. We got to beat Kennedy. And I disagreed, and I said, that, you can't beat Reagan. He'll carry Texas going away. Mm-hmm. And they didn't see it that way. And I've mentioned before on this Hamilton Jordan, who was chief of staff, he told me one day after we were there, and I questioned, the way they were running their campaign, that they were going to get beat from Reagan, not from Kennedy. And he said, well, you're never going to get invited back here. And I said, well, it's not going to matter because y'all not going to be here anyway. And they lost, but everybody portrayed it as a close election. And remember, the week before, 2 weeks before the Trump and Kamala Harris election, I said it reminded me of what happened with Reagan and Carter, and it was close, and everybody is on the edge and seeing what was going to happen. And about 10 days before the election, it just kind of changed, and it was like everybody was going, that's not what we want. Mm-hmm. And I think they did that on Kamala Harris, and I think they did it on President Carter, that the Iranians had taken hostages at our embassy, were holding them hostage, and then Koppel was having a story on it every night, 10:30, news about, and it just went on and on. And I think people got to the point they were thinking that this is never going to come to an end. And there's, we need somebody to try something new. And, of course, the hostages were released right after President Reagan was sworn in. And I think the Iranians did not realize that it's going to be a lot harder to deal with Reagan than it was Carter. And Carter was trying to work something out with him, but he couldn't get anywhere with him. And he had the attempt to free the hostages, and our planes, our helicopters got so much dust that some of them broke down, were left there in the desert. And so it was everything they tried to get the hostages blew up in front of them. It was one of those deals the gang couldn't shoot straight. And I felt sorry for Carter, but it was obvious to me that Reagan was going to bring some leadership in. And if you haven't seen the movie about Reagan, you ought to go see it. It's really good. It's how he won the Cold War without firing a shot, and that how he built up our military, and the Russians tried to match it, and they couldn't do it without breaking them, and that's what happened. And so he was able to do that, and it's to be congratulated. But Jimmy Carter to be congratulated, I think, on 2 primary things. One, Camp David that I mentioned, and the other, Habitat for Humanity. He did a great job on that. He didn't make speeches for $50,000 or anything like that. He didn't believe he ought to use his presidency for that. And but he really worked hard at Habitat for Humanity. And they built a lot of houses, a lot of places. Every major city throughout the country has a Habitat for Humanity organization, and they've done a great job. They've done a lot for housing.
I think that's his legacy, President Carter. That's what he's going to be remembered as a great humanitarian that really put in some sweat equity into building homes for people that needed them.
No, I agree with you. I think it was a big part of his success, and he did that after he left. But the one thing that I think the Camp David Accord during during the process of his actual presidency.
His brother gave him a hard time, didn't he?
Billy came to Lubbock one time,
Did he?
and he came to Lubbock and he met with a bunch of cotton farmers, and he told them he's a farmer, and he was colorful, and then they got through ask a question. He said, "I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to go drink some beer." Well, Carter, I think that the Carter handlers wished he hadn't said that, but
I remember there was a brand of Billy
Beer.
Beer.
They had, he was somebody that Carter was proud of, but he was prouder of some moments more than others. And I told him when I first visited with the president that Billy was a big help to him in West Texas, and he laughed and he said, "Well, that wasn't true every place he went," And he told him that there's a lot of sand out here in the air. What do y'all do? How do you live out here? He said some things like that. If Billy thought it, especially if he had a beer or two, he said it. And so I think that's the thing the president didn't cherish about his brother, but he was pretty funny. President Carter, he had 3 siblings, and all 3 died of pancreatic cancer, and yet he lived to be 100. And I think his faith helped him a lot, and he was not someone that would get real mad about something, and kind of would ride with the flow.
Good temperament.
Yeah, good, very good temperament. And you could be at the White House with him and tell him what you thought about something, and he'd say, that's good. I'm glad to know that. And he'd be nice about it, but it'd be in one ear and out the other sometimes. And but he surrounded himself with some people that were very liberal, and they were trying to appease the Ted Kennedy wing of the party, which either of their wing of the Democratic Party at that time compared to today would be non-existent. They were old liberal Democrats. They weren't progressives. There wasn't a Bernie Sanders in the group. And Carter fought hard. He worked hard. And he had some, I think Jody Powell was his press secretary. And Jody Powell got a job with him when he was running, and his job was to drive him. He got to know him and knew how he thought and how he felt, and was pretty good at answering questions that the press would have about Jimmy Carter. And then, he had the statement. He came out in Playboy. He said something about he had lust in his eyes before, and that mentally he had committed adultery. And that's one of those deals that a president says and the staff's going to say, "Mr. President, you don't have to say something on that, be quiet." And he had a few faux pas like that, but he was an honest guy. I think he meant well, but without a Bob Strauss as chief of staff, I think his staff, they were in over their head.
Was there any scandal with President Carter? Was there anything that was,
His brother at one time, it looked like Gaddafi had hired his brother to help him, and they got that stopped. Look, Billy, you can go drink beer and have Billy beer, but you can't help Gaddafi. That won't work.
Was that a real thing, or was it just some hoax?
No, that Gaddafi did approach him.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, the president doesn't need that.
And no president needs that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any help to him. But I'm sure there was something, but he tried to be straightforward and upfront, and just like on the Department of Education, I just told him I couldn't vote for it, and I didn't believe it would help, and my constituents weren't for it.
You mentioned earlier the Department of Energy was created. Then, what was the argument for that?
Argument, when the Arab oil embargo took place and gasoline shot up, the price went up, and that was in 74 and late 73 and all of 74. And gasoline prices doubled and tripled in a short period of time. So everybody's trying to do something, and former Congressman Jim Wright, who's now deceased, he kept saying, if we have a Department of Energy to look after all the energy issues, I think prices will go down. And that's not what happened. The Department of Energy, they have more to do on nuclear energy, regulating it, and trying to make sure they get rid of the waste and everything. And so they're not an oil and gas, entity. And it didn't create a barrel of oil anyplace, and was not seen. He was Carter, and we turned him down in Congress. He was for price controls, and Nixon put on price controls, and Nixon, when he did it, thought that the price controls on like on cattle, on beef, we busted all the cattle people, and it didn't help anything. In price controls, they used to tell the story about the guy that went in a grocery store, and the bananas, were 50 cents a banana, and he went over and told the owner. He said that's too expensive and everything, and he told the owner, he said, the guy down the street selling them for a dime, and the fella said, when I'm out, I sell them for a dime too. If you got no bananas, the price can be a dime or a penny. It won't matter. You don't have. There's none to sell, and that price controls never work. They always make things worse. And Republicans and Democrats both have tried them, and in both times, they did not work. Did not work at all. But Carter will have a funeral. He'll lay in state at the Capitol, I would imagine, and that this week the new members of Congress, House and Senate, will be sworn in, and that'll be on Thursday and Friday.
How do you think Speaker Johnson's feeling right now?
Well, probably a little nervous. He's. I think there's certain groups that just want him out. I think that if he decides not to run, it'll be because Trump asked him not to. I think that Trump likes him and deals with him, and I think that Trump and others within the Republican Party do not want another fight that's has as much publicity as the last one did. And they've got, depending on the day you look at the votes, they've got somewhere between 2 and 4, maybe 5 majority. And every president, they lose in the House their votes. They lose some of their votes at the end of 2 years. So that in 2 years from now, it'll be hard for the Republicans to maintain control of the House. They might be able to do it. And if Trump's popularity's high, then they might be able to do it.
The fight that you're referring to that you don't want to see again, you're referring to the Matt Gaetz fight.
Yeah, the Gaetz fight, and the Green, Congresswoman Green from Georgia, and it took on a personal nature, and it just was nasty for everybody. And finally, they gave up. They had this candidate, and then they had this candidate, and they finally gave up and went with Johnson. And it's amazing that a state size of Louisiana, which is a small state, that they've got the speaker and the majority leader. And both of them have a good read of Congress. Scalise, and Scalise lucky to be alive. And he has a good feel of Congress. And so does Johnson, but I think this will be a decision that'll probably be made by the president. That if he wants him in, I think he's in. If he wants him out, I think he's out. I don't know that he would run again and cause that much of a problem.
You mentioned the new members coming in this week. What's their week like? Do they have an orientation?
Oh yeah, you have orientation. It would have been last week. Or the week before. It's about a week, and they somebody they tell you where the restrooms are. Don't hold out on that. But about staff, and you'll have everyone that gets elected will receive hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. People want to work for you, and that they don't pay a lot, because someone that will have a PhD from Harvard and they want on their resume that they worked for Congress at one point in time. So you have a lot of people that work for almost nothing. There was a girl from Texas Tech that was very good and smart and had been an intern before, and she got a job and they were paying her $32,000. And she said in Washington, D.C., she almost qualified for food stamps.
Yeah.
And that I think Congress, that they really hang on to that money to keep their expenses down, so that people won't think they're a big spender. But at the same time, you need to hold on to those good employees and make sure that you keep them. And it'll be new for all the new members, and they'll be sworn in, and that I'm going to be up there, and we'll go on the floor when they're sworn in as a former member of Congress. You can do that.
So you're going to go and
Right,
experience that? That's
right.
neat.
And there's a lot of people that that are new, and I think that it's going to be a big turnout of their constituents. And if you have someone that Craig Golden from Fort Worth, he took Kay Granger's place, and it's kind of sad the way her situation ended. But she was a strong member. She was chairman of appropriations, and then Michael Burgess is left, and he was chairman of one of the subcommittees on energy and commerce and on healthcare issues. He was really good. He was the best. And so, and then Michael McCall from Austin was chairman of foreign relations. He's termed out. He can only serve 3 terms. And the ones we have left would be Jody Arrington as chairman of the budget committee, and he's done a great job. And you'll hear more about his work. It comes back to what we talked before. We're going to have Jody Arrington on in the next few weeks. But I'm telling you, the budget and the deficits are overwhelming, and it never got mentioned in the presidential campaign. Nobody brought it up because they didn't have a solution. Or if they had a solution, it was going to be worse than the problem, And so everybody just kind of skimmed over it and moved on.
Their solution was not something the public wanted to hear.
No, the public wants to hear they're either going to, the Democrats want to hear we're going to increase spending, government spending and programs, and Republicans want to hear we're going to cut your taxes. And if you're saying that, then how are you going to make up the difference? And that's deficit spending. So it's this is something that's really. I want to talk about the next couple of weeks, and when Jody's on the program, about the difference in $1 million and $1 billion and $1 trillion, and it's significant, and we'll be going over that. One other thing that I looked at, that on Christmas gifts, there was a story came out about what offended people, what did. In one of the big ones, 38% of the public thinks it is inappropriate to give somebody a pet for Christmas without asking them ahead of time. And I would say absolutely it's inappropriate. If somebody shows up at your house with a dog or a cat and you hadn't even thought about owning one or something, it makes it a little difficult. We also had the stupid criminal. The guy stole an Amazon truck delivery van, and he stole it, and then he had on a T-shirt that said "Good Vibes Only." I don't know what he said. He got arrested, and he is not going to go very, very far. But getting back on the Christmas thing, that there were 56% said it was unacceptable to leave on price tags. And I can see that, But the other thing you got to look at, if they're going to have to return it, you know, what number of tags do you live on? And that 40% said that it's unacceptable to give a toy gun to a kid. Now, look, there's about 40% of the people voted for Kamala Harris, and I think that's where they're coming from. That I wouldn't, you know, I mean, I don't think that was something that should be done. There were 34% said that re-gifting a gift, that you get a gift and you just wrap it up and give it to somebody else. 34% said they thought that was unacceptable. And another one that I did one time that said, I believe it was 28% said it's unacceptable to give a noise-making gift to a child, you know, and I gave some drums to some relatives one time, little kids, and boy, the parents, you know, I asked kids that later, where are your drums? We lost them. Something happened. You know, somebody stole the drums. And those kids, they get to playing those drums, and it'd be pretty loud.
Oh, I bet parents wanted to kill you.
Yeah, they did. But my kids were older at the time, so they couldn't get even, at least at that point in time. Saying of the day, whatever starts in California has a tendency to spread, unfortunately. Wish everybody a happy new year, and will be a lot of football the next 4 or 5 days, and I look forward to seeing it all.